Okay, welcome everybody to this online open house for the Institute for Computational Medicine. I'm Ray Winslow, and I'm the director of this institute. And I direct the institute. I founded this institute in 2005. I'm also the director of our master's program in biomedical engineering. I'll be telling you a little bit about that. We also have an NIH T32 predoctoral training grant for PhD trainees in computational medicine. And with me is Inez Lam. Inez is one of our superstar PhD students, also from Hopkins as an undergraduate. And so she stuck around and joined us as a PhD student. And she's working with Dr. Phelim McGowan in his lab, who's in Phelim is a core faculty member of the Institute as well. So, computational medicine is a discipline that was launched here at Johns Hopkins when our institute was created in 2005. And we're on the Homewood campus of Johns Hopkins University. At Johns Hopkins, institutes are organizations that span schools. And so we're an institute in the Whiting School of Engineering and in the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. And there are many well-known divisions of Hopkins, including not only the Whiting School of Engineering and certainly the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, but also the Applied Physics Laboratory, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. And Hopkins is a very well-known university. It's the birthplace of the modern academic research university here in Baltimore. And I think we have probably more federal funding for basic and clinical research than any other university in the country. Whiting School of Engineering has about 1,600 graduate students, about 1,800 undergraduates. It has a large part-time graduate program of about 2,500 people, 180 tenure track and tenured faculty, 31 research faculty, and 32 teaching faculty, and a number of research scientists and engineers. Quite a few PhD programs, 9 PhD programs, 14 different master's programs, and you can learn about all of those at the Whiting School of Engineering website. A large part-time master's program, as well as offering a number of online graduate degrees. The Institute brings together numerous investigators from both the School of Medicine, the School of Public Health, and the Whiting School of Engineering. And our goal is to apply methods from engineering, mathematics, computer science, to focus on important biomedical questions, to understand the origins of disease, and to find new ways of treating disease. We have a very large number of collaborations throughout the university, spanning the School of Medicine, the School of Public Health, All Children's Hospital in Florida's many academic collaborations with places such as MIT, Cleveland Clinic, UC Santa Cruz, University of Utah, University of Rochester, and many other places. We have 17 core faculty in the Institute. The core faculty are really the faculty who lead the Institute. They work with me to do what we do. They establish the programs and the research areas, the research thrusts of the Institute. We have 11 research faculty. These are people who are appointed as research engineers or research scientists. There are more than 46 faculty from around the university that are what we call affiliated faculty, who are connected to the Institute in many different ways and also help us advance our mission. We have about 12 postdoctoral fellows within the Institute and more than 60 graduate students within the Institute now. So we have a big corpus of graduate students for these faculty. So here you see pictures of different faculty, and we've defined 4 areas of research in the Institute, and they are computational anatomy, computational physiological medicine, computational molecular medicine, and computational healthcare. In each one of these areas, we try and do three things. The first is we seek to develop computational models, mechanistically based models of disease. A disease is so complex that it can't be understood without the help of computer models. And that's core to our mission and our thinking here. And so we work to develop very quantitative models of disease. The second thing we try and do is to figure out how, once we have these models, how we can personalize them using data that can be measured in real patients. And that sounds trivial, but it's not trivial at all. It's quite hard. It's one of the hardest things to do because we're so limited. Even today, we are so limited in what we can really measure from patients and how we can go about constraining models in such a way that we tune those models to represent that particular patient. And once we have these personalized models, we then apply them to deliver improved care, whether that's through improving our ability to predict the onset of disease, predict risk of disease, or to choose a therapy for a patient with a particular disease. So these are the three things that we think comprise computational medicine, and we try and bring them together in what we do. So in the area of computational anatomy, we develop mathematical and computational models of anatomy in health and anatomy in disease. And so by anatomy, I mean we examine the structure of organs and how they differ in disease, as you're going to see shortly in a few examples, which I will give you in brain disease, where we use brain imaging data to understand how changes in brain structure can be predictive of particular types of neurodevelopmental and neuropsychiatric disorders. So this is the mission of computational anatomy, to understand medical imagery and how it can be used to perform early diagnosis of the disease and inform disease therapy. Computational physiological medicine seeks to develop very detailed computer models of disease. We work in infectious disease, in brain diseases, in heart disease, in cancer, and armed with these models, we attempt to use models to predict novel drug targets, to design improved therapies for disease, to design surgeries, and to design and optimize therapies that are used to treat disease. These are all fair game in the discipline of computational physiological medicine. In computational molecular medicine, we're really looking for improved ways of predicting risk of genetic disease, and we are developing new machine learning methods, statistical learning methods that can better use biomarkers and other features that can be measured from individual patients in order to perform more accurate, more sensitive, more specific patient diagnosis. And then finally, in computational healthcare, we're trying to understand how very large medical data sets, for example, physiological data measured from patients, for example, patients in critical care units are very heavily instrumented with various kinds of sensors, and data is streaming from these patients. We're trying to understand how these data and how data from the electronic health record can be used to better predict, diagnose, and treat disease. And so these are four areas of computational medicine that we've defined over the years and that we work in. So I mentioned earlier that we have a master's program in computational medicine, and this master's program is run through the biomedical engineering department. It's a focus area in the Department of Biomedical Engineering Masters of Science and Engineering program. And so students, when they apply to the Biomedical Engineering Master's program, they can select their focused area on the application form. So if you're interested in computational medicine, you check off the computational medicine focus area. And we manage a one-year course-based program that requires students complete what is typically 8 courses or 24 credits of coursework. And We have two core requirements. The first is a new course that we've developed called Introduction to Computational Medicine, which is an overview of computational anatomical medicine and computational physiological medicine. And then one can choose between two alternative courses, Foundations of Computational Biology and Bioinformatics 2, or Computational Molecular Medicine. Either of those choices will complete our two core focus area requirements. Both of those courses are courses on modern genomics and bioinformatics and methods of analyzing genomics data in order to build improved diagnostics, for example, to determine the genes that are involved in driving diseases like cancer. We've compiled a list of focus area electives, and so students can choose from at least 3 of those courses, and then students are free to choose general electives with their advisors' advice and support. And so that's one pathway through the computational medicine master's degree focus area, and that is a 1-year course-based pathway. We also have a 2-year thesis-based option where students meet the requirement for this 1-year course-based degree in year 1. And once they've done that, then in the 2nd year, they can continue on to do thesis research with a thesis mentor. And these options are described on our website, and applications are open now. We also now have an NIH training grant in computational medicine. This was just awarded in July, this summer, and we have 4 training grant slots. These 4 slots allow students to apply to either the biomedical engineering PhD program or the applied math PhD program, and we can support students in computational medicine from either of those 2 programs. We don't ourselves have our own degree granting program within the Institute at this time. And so instead, we largely draw on students from other departments. And this particular training grant can support students from the biomedical engineering PhD program or the applied mathematics and statistics PhD program. And support means that students with these fellowships get an initial year of support, and they're free to rotate with faculty, our training program faculty, which includes the core faculty of the Institute for Computational Medicine, as well as other faculty. And at the end of that rotation year, they are required to select a faculty mentor, and then they can work with that mentor and are supported by that mentor moving forward. And so what a training program, one thing a training program does is to enable students to search and get to know faculty and make an informed decision about the laboratory that they want to land in. I said earlier that we have well over 60 PhD students in the department, and the majority of them are supported as research associates, which means that their support comes from their faculty mentors. They are admitted to a lab on day 1, and they work with that mentor from that point forward. And so there's a large population of graduate trainees in the Institute right now, and this is just one new mechanism we have for supporting graduate students who are working towards the PhD degree. Another advantage offered by this training program is that we've established our own curriculum in this program and are attempting to build our own sense of community within this program. And so the same 2 core courses that you saw in the previous slide are also core courses for our PhD students. Our PhD trainees are also expected to do research rotations in the laboratory of our program faculty. And then their 2nd year, they do something special, a clinical rotation in the lab of a clinician who they typically identify as a collaborator of the faculty member that they're working with. And this gives trainees an opportunity to be immersed in a clinical environment and work directly with patient data and get a better understanding of what it's really like to be in a clinical research environment. We've established a computational medicine journal club, which is really oriented around our distinguished seminars in computational medicine that are held once a month. And so what we do in this journal club is that all of our PhD students are able to take part in this journal club. And whoever the speaker is for that month, we go over a few of their papers in journal club before they come to give their seminar. And then students are prepared for their seminar and can ask fabulous questions. And they also have a lunch session with the seminar speaker where they get to sit down with the speaker and talk about whatever they want to talk about for about an hour or an hour and a half, and ask whatever questions they want to ask about science, about academic life, about life, whatever. And we have an annual Institute for Computational Medicine retreat, which is always at a great location, and it's a 2-day retreat, and that's where we do our strategy planning and our coordination for the year, and everybody in the Institute is invited to that, all the students, all the faculty, everybody. It's a great event. I've already talked about our 4 principal research areas. To repeat, they're computational, molecular medicine, anatomy, physiological medicine, and healthcare. And now what I want to do is just give you some examples that are intended to illustrate what some of these different research areas are about. And so this first example is work that I'm doing with Dr. Sri Sarma. It's in the area that we call computational healthcare. And we have recently developed methods that allow us to collect sensor data from patients who are in critical care units. So in virtually every hospital in the country, data from physiological sensors like the ECG, the EEG, blood oxygen levels, heart rate, blood pressure, all of these signals, they're displayed on a bedside monitor, but are then typically lost. They're not captured. There are a few tools for capturing and saving these data, and then linking them back to other data, such as that in the electronic health record for that patient. Well, we've developed a software platform for doing this, which allows us to capture these streaming data. And the general problem that we're interested in addressing are, can we, well ahead of time, predict when a patient in a critical care unit is going to undergo a change in their physiological state, a change that's clinically significant and may have high risk associated with it. And a particular example that we've been working on are patients who develop sepsis or who are admitted to the hospital having sepsis, and we're attempting to predict which patients with sepsis will at some time point in the future progress to septic shock. Sepsis is a leading cause, and septic shock are leading causes of mortality. In this country, 30 to 50% of all hospital deaths are due to sepsis and septic shock. It's the most costly disease to treat. You might have guessed cancer, you might have guessed heart disease. Sepsis and septic shock are the leading cost drivers in medical care today, and they're also the leading hospital readmission cause. And so dealing with sepsis and early prediction of sepsis in an effort to reduce both treatment cost and to limit mortality is very important. And so what I'm going to describe for you is an approach that we've taken that allows us to take these physiological time series data that are coming every minute from the patient, combine them with data from the electronic health record, and using a statistical model to generate a risk score. And then we apply a decision threshold to that risk score such that if the patient's risk crosses that threshold, we predict that at some time in the future that patient will develop septic shock. So what you see here is something known as a receiver operating characteristic curve. The x-axis is false positive rate. A false positive means that we've made a prediction that a patient with sepsis is going to develop shock, but we got it wrong. The y-axis is true positive rate, and that means that that rate is the likelihood that when we say a patient with sepsis will develop shock, that we get it right. And so As the threshold that I referred to in the previous slide is varied, each choice of threshold, which applied to the risk score, will yield a different false positive rate and a different true positive rate. And so for any of the detection methods, and the one we've developed is shown in the light blue line, it's labeled shock alert, that's what we call our method. That family of points you see that generate that light blue curve are the values for false positive rate and true positive rate for many different choices of threshold. And so by plotting these values in this manner, we can choose an optimal decision threshold that meets our criteria of interest. And when we do that, our sensitivity and specificity, our ability to get these decisions right, is about 80%. And on average, we can do this 13 to 30 hours ahead of time. That is to say, we can predict with high reliability those patients with sepsis who are likely to develop septic shock. We can do it 13 to 30 hours before they develop septic shock. And that opens up a huge window of intervention during which physicians can step in to potentially save their lives from undergoing this life-threatening condition. So that's a first example. Here's a second example from the work of Natalia Troyanova in our institute. And on the right side of this, on the left side of this side of the slide, you see images of 12 different patient hearts. And these are images collected from magnetic resonance imaging, which is a non-invasive way of measuring the structure of these patients' heart. And they've each been given a contrast agent, and that contrast agent marks a region of cardiac infarction in their heart. You can see these regions are the yellow regions within the red-colored myocardium. And so the yellow regions are scar or regions of cardiac infarction in each of these different patients. So each of the patient's hearts have a different geometry, a slightly different shape, but more importantly, each of the patient's hearts have a different scar region. The scar has a different location and it has a different extent. Each of these patients are undergoing a surgical procedure called cardiac ablation therapy. Each of these patients suffers from arrhythmia, and the point of that cardiac ablation therapy procedure is to try and locate where in the heart the arrhythmia is being generated from, and then insert a catheter into the heart and go to that region and burn it with a laser beam, destroying that cardiac tissue, destroying the site of origin of the cardiac arrhythmia. And this is a very commonly done procedure. It's a very difficult procedure, and the challenge is it's hard for clinicians to know where the arrhythmia is originating from, and therefore they have a difficult time finding the correct region of the heart to burn and destroy to prevent that arrhythmia from arising. And so what you see in this middle image here, this image of a heart, kind of a transparent image of a heart, you see these little dots, these red dots that are all throughout that image. These are locations in a patient's heart where the surgeons have made burns in an effort to terminate the patient's arrhythmia. And they're making lots and lots of burns because in the surgery, they'll induce an arrhythmia in this heart. They'll try and figure out where it's coming from. They'll go there and burn, and they get it wrong. And so they burn many, many times at many, many locations. And hopefully they finally get it right. And so the point of Natalia's work, this aspect of her work, is to help physicians do this better. And so the way she helps them do it better is she builds a computer model of electrical conduction in that individual patient's heart using the MR data that was shown on the left. She simulates arrhythmias in these hearts and tries to use the model to determine where in the heart that arrhythmia is originating from, and determines where would be the best location for the physician to burn to terminate the arrhythmia. In this particular heart, in this particular case, that region is shown by the blue band that you see labeled within the heart, and here's a close-up of it. So this blue region here is the optimal region to burn, and a few of the burns that the physician made got it right, They were close to that region, but these were the last few burns made in the surgical procedure. And so right now, this approach is in clinical trials. It's been tested in a handful of patients. I should say tested successfully in a handful of patients. It did help the physicians get to the right spot to make these burns. It's proven to be very successful in animal models of cardiac infarction and limiting arrhythmia in animal models, and now it's undergoing active clinical trials at several different hospitals around the country. So those are two examples. And so I think Inez is now going to talk about her time here and what she's doing. So Inez, you've got it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Winslow. Hi, everyone. As you might know by now, I'm Inez. I'm a second-year PhD student in biomedical engineering. And I actually also did my undergraduate degree in biomedical engineering at Hopkins with a minor in computational medicine. And so a common question that I guess asked is why I came here. Like, oh, you already did your undergrad here. Why did you decide to stay for graduate school? So I thought I'd talk about a little bit about my experiences here as a graduate student and, you know, why I decided to come and to give you a better idea to see if if JHU is the right place for you. So as I mentioned earlier, I did a minor in computational medicine, and this was actually an undergraduate minor that was first offered my senior year. And so that's how I got introduced to ICM, and that's how I got to meet a lot of the faculty here. And I also started working in the lab here as an undergrad that I ended up sticking around in for my PhD. So, and that was kind of definitely a major part of my experience, but also through that I could really see the ICM community, that all the people here were really passionate and dedicated about what they do, and there is so much diverse research going on. It was always really cool to talk to different people across different labs, and of course, all the people here that I've met are really wonderful and great to work with. So and I also found that we recently had, Dr. Winslow also mentioned, we have our annual retreats every year, and that's where students can really get a chance to hear about what other students are working on, and also what the faculty have been planning for ICM. And I can, just from a student perspective, I can tell that ICM is really forward thinking, and we're always looking ahead and trying to see what's going on. And I think that is just and they always look for student feedback, which I find that is really important in hearing student voices. And also in Hopkins in general, talking more about the opportunities available here, there are so many different schools and divisions within Hopkins. So there's School of Medicine and School of Engineering and Arts and Sciences, and we as graduate students really get a great opportunity to make the most and take advantage of all these different schools. So I actually get to take classes in both the School of Medicine and School of Engineering, which I think is really helpful for my research and my personal learning. And there's also just countless other extracurricular opportunities, which I'll get to in a little bit. And in general, I took a class, for example, I took a class in medical entrepreneurship last year, and that was a lot of fun, just something I didn't really think I would have the opportunity to, but I did because I'm here. So now to talk a little bit about my research. So as I mentioned, there's lots of great research going on in ICM, and I personally work with Dr. Phelan McGowan, and so he's actually he actually started working in his lab in my senior year. So I started working in his lab my senior year of undergrad, and I enjoyed it so much that I decided to stick around for my PhD there. So just to touch up briefly on our research, it falls in the field of systems pharmacology. And so basically we're interested in looking at how different drugs and therapies work inside the human body, and by building upon a very molecular and mechanistic understanding of the signaling networks in the human body. And that way we can eventually scale that up and look at how drugs work across a variety of patients with a variety of different factors, and that can help us simulate virtual clinical trials and also look at how personalized medicine could benefit different subsets of patients. And I in particular am interested in looking at different forms of immunotherapy, but you're welcome to ask me more about that later if you're interested. And lastly, to touch on student groups, as I mentioned earlier, there are a ton of different student groups across Hopkins, and the main student leadership group that's based at Homewood is called the GRO, the Graduate Representative Organization, and they're kind of the ones in charge of the Homewood graduate students, and they're really active. They hold weekly coffee hours and happy hours here, and really help to kind of build that graduate community in Homewood. So I think that's really great. And so, but the student groups are not limited to just Homewood. They are spread across different campuses, so including School of Medicine, for example. And so you can find, whatever your interests are, like dancing, running. There's a marathon team that I would never join. There's, like any sort of interest that you might have. I'm sure there is a group for you there and here. And if there isn't, then you're always welcome to start one. So for example, I'm in a group called Women of Whiting. So here in the Whiting School of Engineering, it's a group for building the graduate community of women engineers. And I'm also involved with the Biomedical Engineering PhD Council. So now next slide. Okay, so talk a little bit more about Baltimore. So it's actually, Baltimore is kind of in a great position in regards to where we are. So we're only an hour away from DC. It's really easy to take the train to get there. Only 3 hours away from New York. So really accessible to anywhere on the East Coast. And I guess it was ranked the number two food city in the U.S. So, and actually I can vouch there's a lot of great food here in Baltimore. And if you're a foodie like me, like there's a lot of different hole in the wall places you can go to and explore. And it's always a lot of fun. And yeah, Baltimore, it's one of the biggest startup cities. And actually, I can say I'm actually involved in the startup as well. So that I can definitely say that there's a big kind of community here. And for whatever your interests are, whether it's academia or industry, there's a lot of different directions that you can go. And Hopkins is kind of like the ideal place to do it here. Okay. And to talk a little bit more about housing, so these are all the different neighborhoods that most students live in around the Homewood area. So I think the majority of students live in Charles Village, and it's it's a very affordable area. Remington is also kind of, I think it's like it's kind of more recently been developed area, and there's a lot of different there's a lot of new housing there and startup space, and there's that place in the picture is called Our House. It's a great like little hipster food court type area where you can go, and there's a lot of different great food to try, which I would highly recommend. And then Hamden is also a really fun neighborhood to check out, and events. So Artscape, which I actually did go to this year, it's a lot of fun. It's like basically they close off the whole street in the middle of the city, and tons of people just come. And Baltimore, not many people might know this, but Baltimore has a really big art scene. So a lot of artists bring their work. There's MICA, it's like the Maryland Institute College of Art is nearby, and so there's a lot of students there that showcase their artwork. And that's just one of the many events that happen every year. And Hopkins itself has a lot of fun events like Spring Fair, and I could keep rambling on about it, but yeah, that's just a little taste of what you might experience as a student here. Okay. And, yeah, I think that's. I think Dr. Winslow is going to cover the rest of this. So yeah, thank you. And feel free to ask me any more questions if you have any.
That was great, Inez. Thank you. It made me think of one thing that I should say. And that one thing is, I think the most remarkable aspect of Johns Hopkins University as a whole is the collegiality of the individual labs throughout the university. It really is effortless to build collaborations across labs. Students are often the leaders of these, initiators of these collaborations. I've time and time again seen new faculty come in and immediately begin collaborating with very well-known, highly established faculty throughout the university. I've seen students do this time and time again. I've had my own students meet with faculty that they've never met before, and at the end of the meeting, those faculty are inviting them to enter their lab and do experiments. So it's a real strength. This collegiality is a real strength of Hopkins. It's something very powerful here. It's really enabling of research. So, of course, we put out students out into the world who go on to do great things. So some choose to go on and do academic research. Others choose to go into industry. That percentage has shifted, as it has at most places, to favor industry over the years, but we still have many students choosing to continue on with academic research, and so they go to the institutions that you see listed in this slide, as well as others. And we have many students who are involved in entrepreneurial activities and startup companies, other students involved in large established companies with advanced research centers. And so it's a real diverse group of students and a diverse set of opportunities that you can pursue once you leave this place. And it's not always into research in industry either. Many of our students choose to go into consulting, and you can see that in the names of some of the companies listed here, the Boston Consulting Group, for example. And others go into the federal government, for example, as program officers or researchers at NIH, as members of the Food and Drug Administration, who's taking an ever-increasing interest in the importance of computational modeling in the drug and device industry and in regulation of drugs and devices. And they go on to research careers in nonprofit entities like the Broad Institute, for example. And many go into large pharmaceutical companies. Every large pharmaceutical company now has a computational modeling group, a computational medicine group. They may call it something else. It's often called systems pharmacology, because that's a popular name in the drug industry, as you can imagine. But they all have these groups now. It's really coming up. So Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merrimack Pharmaceuticals, Bristol Myers Squibb, Sanofi, these are the major drug companies operating in the US. You see a lot of device companies on this list: St. Jude Medical, Medtronics, national labs like Los Alamos, Dow AgroSciences. So we have a very diverse group of students, and therefore a very diverse set of activities that they enter into when they go on here. In terms of admission requirements, the ones listed here are guidelines for our master's program. So for our master's program, certainly calculus 1 through 3, solid background in other math like linear algebra, ordinary differential equations, probability and statistics. You see here the mean quantitative GRE, verbal GRE, and the college GPA. These are means for our entire applicant pool to our master's program last year, just to give you an example of those statistics and the requirements for the master's program. Probably 60% of our applicants are engineering majors of, maybe 70% are engineering majors of some kind. The majority of them are biomedical engineering or bioengineering majors as undergraduates. And so they're coming in already with a background in biomedical science and engineering and building it here. And these statistics wouldn't differ significantly for our PhD program either. The people coming into our PhD program are not all that different from the applicant pool to our master's program. It's just that these two pools have made somewhat different decisions about how they want to pursue advanced education. They're both equally qualified pools. I'm happy to talk with anybody about the master's or PhD programs here and give you whatever advice I can on your choice.